You were never taught financial education. Not really. Not the parts that matter. And that single missing piece explains far more about your money habits than any lack of discipline ever could. Most people carry a quiet shame around money, convinced they're somehow bad at something everyone else seems to understand. They're not bad at it. They just never got the manual. Think about what school actually prepared you for. Algebra, essay structure, historical dates, years of instruction on things you may use occasionally as an adult. Meanwhile, the average person will file taxes, take on debt, negotiate a salary, and make investment decisions dozens of times, often with real money on the line, and receive close to zero formal instruction on any of it. That's not a personal failing. That's a systemic gap, and you inherited it the same way everyone else did. So where did your actual money habits come from, if not a classroom? Almost entirely from observation. You watched how the adults around you talked about money, or avoided talking about it. You absorbed whether bills were a source of tension, whether spending was secretive or open, whether "we can't afford that" was said constantly or never at all. None of that was formal instruction, but all of it became your operating system, running quietly in the background of every financial decision you'd eventually make on your own. This is why am I bad with money is one of the most common searches people type into Google at 2 a.m., usually right after checking a balance they didn't want to see. It feels deeply personal. It isn't. It's the predictable result of learning personal finance basics through osmosis instead of instruction, then being expected to perform flawlessly anyway, as if everyone else got a briefing you somehow missed. Here's what actual financial education would have covered if anyone had bothered to teach it clearly. Compound interest. How it works for you when you invest early, and against you when you carry a balance. The real cost of debt, expressed not just as a percentage, but as what that percentage actually does to your money over years. The difference between good debt and bad debt, since not all borrowing is equal. Budgeting as a living tool that adjusts to your life, not a rigid spreadsheet you abandon by February. And maybe most importantly, the psychological side of money. The fact that most financial decisions are emotional first and logical second, something we cover constantly on this channel. Without that foundation, people develop money habits through trial and error, often expensive error. You overdraft an account and learn the hard way what happens when timing goes wrong, usually with a fee attached that feels disproportionate to the mistake. You carry a credit card balance because nobody explained what minimum payment actually costs you over a year. That number is buried in fine print most people never read, and it's designed that way. You avoid your bank app entirely because looking feels worse than not knowing, so the gap widens in silence instead of closing. None of this happened because you're careless. It happened because you were handed a system with no instructions and told to figure it out under pressure, usually while also handling rent, work, and everything else life demands at the same time. There's a particular kind of shame that comes from this gap, and it's worth naming directly, because shame is what keeps people stuck the longest, longer than the actual knowledge gap ever would on its own. If you believe you're simply bad with money, as some fixed trait, you stop looking for the actual gaps in your knowledge because why would you study something you've already decided you're inherently incapable of? That belief becomes self-fulfilling, not because it's true, but because it stops the search for real answers before it starts, and it tends to get reinforced every time a financial mistake happens, even a small one. The fix isn't complicated, but it does take intention because nothing about modern life hands you this information automatically. Start with the concepts that touch your life directly. If you carry any debt, understand exactly how interest is calculated on it. Not roughly exactly, because roughly is how people underestimate what they're actually paying. If you're not investing at all, understand the absolute basics of compound growth, because that single concept alone changes how urgent starting early actually feels. If budgeting has always failed for you, consider that the tool was the problem, not you. A rigid line-item budget fights against how real spending actually happens, and a percentage-based approach often works far better for people who've bounced off spreadsheets before. It also helps enormously to talk about money out loud, with someone you trust, in a way you probably weren't raised to do. Financial secrecy is incredibly common and incredibly isolating, and it means most people are quietly guessing whether their situation is normal because nobody around them is being honest about theirs. You are almost certainly not as far behind as you think you are, and you'd know that for certain if more people simply said the actual numbers out loud instead of performing confidence. If any part of this resonated, comment with the one money concept you wish someone had actually sat you down and explained, because that tells me exactly where to go deeper next on this channel. And there's a good chance thousands of people are wondering the exact same thing. You are not bad with money. You were handed a system with no instructions, expected to perform anyway, and quietly blamed yourself when it didn't go smoothly. That ends the moment you start treating this as a knowledge gap instead of a character flaw, because a knowledge gap can be closed. This channel exists to close it, one concept at a time, starting with exactly what we covered today. There's a full playlist here building out the rules nobody sat you down and explained. Subscribe if you want the rest of them.